the wind rolled over the empty plains like a whisper from the past, dry, restless, and full of ghosts. The old ranch sat at the edge of the desert, where the grass turned to sand and the horizon burned red each evening. For years, it had been home to one man, Eli Turner, a retired rancher whose hands had built everything that now stood before him: the weather-beaten barn, the crooked fence lines, and the small cabin where he now spent his days in silence. Once, laughter had filled these walls, the sound of his wife humming, the clatter of hooves, the bark of cattle dogs chasing dust. But that was long ago. Now, only the wind answered him back. Eli had stopped counting the years since he'd put down his rifle and let the world forget his name. Out here, solitude was both punishment and peace. He woke with the sun, fixed fences, fed his last few horses, and sat by the fire when the nights turned cold. Every day looked the same, until that evening. The sky was bleeding gold into purple when it happened, a knock at the door. He froze. Nobody ever came this far. Not anymore. Eli reached for the shotgun hanging near the door and pulled it slightly open. Standing there were 4 women, wrapped in worn blankets, their faces marked with exhaustion, fear, and dust. Their eyes glowed like amber against the setting sun. Apache. He recognized it instantly, from the patterns on their shawls and the quiet strength in their stance. One of them stepped forward, tall, proud, and scarred across her right cheek. Her voice was soft but steady. "We mean no harm, old man. We just need shelter, for one night." Eli's instincts screamed caution. The old wars between settlers and Apache still haunted these lands. He'd lost friends, and maybe they'd lost family. He looked at them hard, trying to read if this was a trap. But something in their eyes, desperation, maybe honor, made him lower the gun. "You can come in," he said slowly, "but if you lie to me, you'll wish you hadn't." They nodded, stepping inside one by one. He counted them again. 4. The leader, the quiet young one with a limp, an older woman who looked like a healer, and a girl who couldn't have been more than 16. Their clothes were torn, their feet blistered, and their faces told a story no one had listened to yet. Eli lit a fire. The women sat in silence, hands close to the flames. He poured them coffee and stew, and though they accepted it cautiously, he noticed how hunger made their hands tremble. Finally, he asked, "What are you running from?" The tall one met his eyes. "Men from Fort Wallace." "Soldiers." Eli stiffened. He'd heard of the raids. The army had been pushing Apache families off their lands again, calling it order. He'd seen the same story before, and it had never ended with justice. "You stole something?" he asked. "Our lives," she said quietly. "They took everything. Burned our camp, killed our men. We escaped." Her words hung heavy in the room. Eli felt something twist inside him, guilt, maybe. He'd once been part of that same machine, back when he wore a badge and thought he was bringing peace to the frontier. Now he realized he'd just been another storm. He sighed. "You can stay tonight. Tomorrow, you'll need to move on." But that night, Eli couldn't sleep. The old memories stirred like rattlesnakes in his chest, the faces of Apache warriors he'd fought, the villages he'd seen burned, the look of a child he once spared and told himself it made him a good man. He turned in bed and stared at the ceiling, listening to the women whisper in their native tongue. The younger one cried softly, and he heard the older woman murmur words that sounded like prayer. Then, sometime after midnight, the dogs began barking. Eli jumped from bed, grabbed his rifle, and looked out the window. In the distance, torchlights flickered near the hills. Riders. He counted at least 6, maybe more, moving fast. He turned back toward the firelight. The Apache leader was already standing, eyes sharp, holding a knife she must have hidden in her clothes. "They found us," she said. Eli cursed under his breath. Damn it. He knew what those soldiers would do, to her, to all of them. He looked at the women, scared, cornered, exhausted. Then at his rifle, and the badge still lying in a drawer under his bed, a relic of the man he used to be. Something inside him broke loose. Maybe it was the years of silence. Maybe it was guilt. Or maybe it was just time to make things right. He stepped to the door, cocked the rifle, and said, "If they want you, they'll have to go through me first." The leader looked at him, surprised. "You would fight your own kind?" Eli's jaw tightened. "They ain't my kind anymore." Outside, the hooves thundered closer. Eli stood in the doorway, framed by the flickering light from the lantern. The night smelled of smoke and gunpowder. His heart beat slow, steady, like it used to before a gunfight. For the first time in years, he didn't feel old. He felt alive. When the riders appeared over the ridge, he shouted, "Turn around. You've got no business here." The men laughed. "You hiding Injuns, old man." Eli raised the rifle. "I'm warning you, leave now." A shot cracked the night. The bullet splintered his porch post. The war had come to his doorstep once again. He fired back. Once. Twice. The gunfire roared across the plain. The Apache women ducked behind barrels, the young ones screaming as bullets shattered the barn wall. The horses neighed wildly. And just like that, the retired rancher became a soldier again. As dawn began to glow over the ridge, the smoke cleared. The riders were gone. Eli's porch was torn up, his shoulder grazed, but the women were alive. The leader stepped forward, eyes glistening. "You didn't have to do that," she whispered. Eli looked at her and said, "Maybe I did. Maybe this land owes you more than I ever did." She nodded, and for a moment, the silence between them wasn't fear, it was respect. That morning, as the sun rose over the broken fences, Eli realized something. His life hadn't ended with retirement. Maybe it was just beginning. "You can stay," he said, "till you figure out where to go next." The girl smiled faintly for the first time. The older woman began tending to his wound. And the tall leader stared out toward the hills, where freedom still waited. The ranch felt alive again, for the first time in years. And as the fire crackled, Eli Turner finally whispered. The sun set slow and blood-red behind the distant hills, painting Eli Turner's ranch in fire and shadow. Smoke still clung to the air from the gunfight that had torn through the place the night before. The fence was riddled with bullet holes, one of the horses lay dead in the corral, and Eli's arm throbbed from the graze that hadn't stopped bleeding. But inside the cabin, the fire was warm again, and for the first time in years, so was Eli's heart. The 4 Apache women had stayed, just like he told them they could. They had cleaned, repaired, and worked silently all day. The young girl, Taya, mended his sleeve with hands that trembled but never stopped moving. The older healer, Noka, brewed herbs and wrapped his wound in strips of clean cloth. The limping one, Suni, chopped wood with quiet determination. And the tall leader, Asha, kept watch from the porch, her sharp eyes scanning the horizon like a hawk that had seen too much. Eli watched her from the window, his coffee cooling in his hands. He didn't know what to call the feeling building in his chest, respect, maybe something deeper, but he knew one thing, he hadn't felt it in decades. That evening, as the wind carried the scent of rain, Asha came in. They'll come again, she said. Soldiers don't forget shame. Eli nodded. I figured as much. He set his cup down and opened a chest at the foot of his bed. Inside was a piece of his past, a Winchester rifle, well-oiled and ready. He hadn't touched it in years. But as he lifted it now, it felt like shaking hands with an old friend. This ranch used to be a safe place, Eli said quietly. I reckon it still can be. Asha studied him. Why do you help us? Your people have done enough already. Eli met her gaze. Because I was one of them once. And I've been trying to make peace with that ever since. The words seemed to hang heavy in the air. She didn't respond, just gave a small nod, as if something inside her softened. Night came faster than they expected. The sky went dark and restless. Distant thunder rumbled, and a light drizzle began to fall. Eli and Asha took turns on watch while the others slept. The rain hit the tin roof in slow, uneven beats, masking the faint sound of something else, hooves. Asha heard them first. She tensed, eyes narrowing. Riders, she whispered. Eli grabbed his rifle and stepped outside. Through the mist and rain, he could see torchlight again, flickering across the plain. At least a dozen riders this time, more disciplined, moving in formation. Soldiers. They were back, and this time, they weren't coming to ask questions. Eli felt his gut tighten. Get the others, he said. Now. Within moments, the women were awake, gathering what little they had. Asha helped Noka load supplies into a small cart. Taya clung to Suni's arm, eyes wide with fear. They'll burn the ranch, Asha said. They can try, Eli replied. He took position behind the wagon, checking his rifle. His old dog growled low beside him. The soldiers stopped 100 yards out, their leader riding forward under the glow of a lantern. Eli Turner, the men shouted. We know you're harboring fugitives. Step aside, and no harm will come to you. Eli's voice thundered across the rain-soaked field. You already brought harm to my land. I'm not stepping aside for killers. A hush fell, then the captain sneered. You'd throw your life away for savages. Eli's rifle cracked before the men finished speaking. The captain dropped from his horse, dead before he hit the mud. Chaos erupted. Gunfire roared across the plain. Bullets tore through the rain, splintering the fence, shattering windows. Eli fired from cover, moving between the barn and wagon, while Asha and Suni returned shots from the porch. The young girl Taya screamed, ducking behind a barrel as rounds ripped through the wood. Noka pulled her close, whispering prayers in Apache under her breath. The sound of thunder merged with the rhythm of gunfire, a storm made of rage and redemption. When Eli ran out of bullets, Asha tossed him a revolver. Their eyes met in that instant, strangers no longer. She shouted something in Apache that he didn't understand, but he didn't need to. It meant stand with me. By dawn, the shooting had stopped. The rain had washed away the smoke, leaving the land raw and quiet. The soldiers had retreated, dragging their dead with them. Only two lay motionless near the corral. Eli leaned against the porch post, breathing hard, blood running from a cut above his eye. His ranch was half destroyed, but the women were alive. Asha approached, her face streaked with dirt and rain. You fought like one of us, she said. Eli smiled faintly. Maybe I always was, deep down. She looked out toward the rising sun. We'll have to go soon. More will come. He nodded. I know. But you'll always have a place here, if ever you need it again. Asha hesitated, then took a step closer. You've given us more than shelter, Eli Turner. You've given us honor. For a long moment, neither spoke. The sky was turning gold again, and the world felt quiet, as if even the wind was holding its breath. Eli turned to the younger girl, who was smiling shyly at the sight of sunlight after so much fear. He realized something then. He hadn't just protected them, they had reminded him what it meant to live. As the women packed to leave, Noka placed a small carved token in his hand, a symbol of protection, shaped like a hawk. Keep this, she said. It will remind the spirits that you stood for the right. When they rode away, the sound of hoofs faded into the morning. Eli stood on his porch, the token warm in his palm, the horizon endless before him. The ranch was battered but alive. And for the first time in a long while, he wasn't alone, not in spirit, not in purpose. He looked at the hawk carving, smiled softly, and said to himself, "Guess an old man can still do some good in this world." As the wind picked up and carried the scent of wild sage through the air, Eli Turner turned toward his house, where the fire still burned, a small light against a vast, untamed land. And though the war had left scars across his body and his heart, something inside him had healed. He had found redemption not in words, but in action. Because sometimes, the Wild West didn't need heroes, It just needed men who refused to look away.